I think it would be much easier to sit in order of our presentations, but we mix a little. So it would be more interesting. But I try to ask questions in order of our lectures. First questions I'd like to ask our colleagues, our friends from Czech. What do you think? What left of Husitism nowadays in contemporary Czech?
You know, there is a quite complicated question because the Hussite movement is only a short part of the today historical memory, and the feeling or the identification of contemporary Czech people with such a national idea is not linked only to the Hussite chapter of the history or late medieval chapter of our history, and is based on other levels, other actions and affairs, like a battle on White Mountain, for example, or the national movement in 19th century. But the Czech people consider the Hussite movement first of all as a matter of national glory and pride because of the military successful and skillfulness, and there is also the question of the national heroes, as I mentioned in presentation, because one can say the small nation needs many heroes, or a couple of big heroes, and Jan Žižka mentioned in presentation is such a big European hero, so it is one of the...
And probably he is connected to our history.
Yeah, of course. It's one of the key personalities of our history, and through these personalities, the contemporary Czech people make their identification as a nationality group.
Jakub would like to add something?
One more thing. The Hussite movement was also used as a symbolic for the modern 20th century armies of Czech or Czechoslovak legionaries during the First World War, and also for the Czechoslovak army during the Second World War. So the symbolic of Čelis, symbolic of Jan Žižka and other Hussite warriors were very motivating stuff.
So I see that in Hasidism this is a stronger military or nationality aspects than religious.
Yes.
Am I right?
Yes. Right.
Thank you.
Correct.
Mr. Claude, I'd like to ask you a little provocative questions. I'd like to know your opinion. Is it good or bad that Napoleon was defeated? Is it good or bad for Europe?
Next question.
No, because
I think that's difficult to answer.
I know that.
For me, it was good to end the war because this is an evolution. You lived in Europe, and the 19th century is very interesting. you live in Europe of kings, and so we know that during the war people are starving, and I think moreover of the population. You've got also slavery and the impact between the war, slavery, all the foods, and the blockades that went on the North Sea had an impact of all the population. And I think the people of that time were waiting for changes. And
yes.
you know, there is a complete, a special kind of independent movement in Europe, and this movement is important for the citizens. And for me, that's important not to have the idea of invader, because after the Battle of Waterloo, you had approximately 100-year peace, even if there were a conflict between one or two countries in Europe. But what about the rest? It go further, and the evolution also of arts, of industry was effective and was important for the evolution of Europe of that time.
I was asking because Napoleon has a very strong position in our history. We were very strong, intensive hopes connected with his power.
But I think that to add on the other hand, that Napoleon was also effective in the evolution of, for example, of school, of the way of acting in cities, in law, and this impact is very important. So you cannot see only Napoleon as a fighter.
That's right. No, not only a military chief or leader. Dr. Moen, I'd like to ask you difficult questions. I'd like to ask you about, can you see or are there any traces of divisions from the Civil War in contemporary, in today's America?
That's an easier question than he got. Thank you. The answer is yes. The issues that Americans fought over internally about 155 or so years ago, we continue to struggle with. And one manifestation of that is the removal of statues to Confederate soldiers around America. And for the most part, that has not affected us at Gettysburg. People understand that the 100 or so monuments to Confederate soldiers at Gettysburg were largely put there as that generation of veterans was dying out. And were put there in that spirit to commemorate their sacrifice also as Americans. Where in the United States it gets more problematic is that we also had a lot of Confederate statues go up during civil rights struggles of the 1950s, 1960s, not on battlefields, but in public squares, in towns. And so as America becomes a more diverse society, which it is, called into question are the propriety of those monuments, not the ones on the battlefield so much, but in those cities. And there we are having vigorous discussions, conversations, and occasionally, including this last week, a Confederate monument is toppled in North Carolina on a university campus. North Carolina had one of the highest percentages of Confederate soldiers killed in the entire American Civil War, and now the Confederate statue has been pulled down. It may be relocated to a different part of campus, but it gives you some sense of how the issues that resonated then still continue to trouble Americans. We still continue to try to work our way through them.
Thank you very much. Now I'd like to ask our colleague from Turkey. On your slideshows, on one of your first slides, we could see a monument shows two soldiers. Could you tell us something more about the monument, the postament?
Yeah, sure. Actually, that monument and that picture is one of the most important side of the Gallipoli campaign, because despite the heavy losses, despite the brutal and bloody combats, the Gallipoli campaign today is known with humanity, conscience, tolerance, help. So that monument today in Gallipoli, and in my slide you ask, is based on a true historic event. During the campaign, during the heavy bombardment and heavy gunfire, Australian New Zealand Army Corps soldier, Anzac soldier, was shot from his leg and could not go anywhere. Also because of the heavy bombardment, nobody could help him. So instantly a Turk come from his trench. He is holding and carrying his enemy and taking him to his own trench. So this is the importance of Gallipoli, I think. In addition to that, when we read the diaries of the soldiers or the events about the war, we always see that there are two sides fighting each other, but there is a humanitarian side, and in those close trenches each other, they even throw cigarettes between themselves, and they always help and respect each other. This is the importance.
And it shows how sophisticated, how difficult is our human nature or situations when we have to exist. I think we we have to stay in this difficult subject, and I'd like to ask Mr. Terry Hapsher, what lessons can we have from history of Verdun battlefields?
It's a large question. First, this battle is the first of a new era. It's an industrial battle. Remember that the first day it is said that 2 million bombs are shot the first day. This battle has no winner and no loser. At the end of this battle, the front line is at the same place. And war, we are 2 years before the end of the war. So we said that the Battle of Verdun is 200 days long, but it continued on 1967, in 1917 and 1918, 2 years more. This is the symbol of the resistance. It's why it's well known in every French family, because of the military strategy that has been developed by the major state. But now, what Verdun, it's symbolically very important, because it is now the symbol not only of a terrific battle, but symbol of peace. And it's maybe the first time in history that we have, in 100 years, passed from a terrific battle to the city of the peace. Verdun is called the city of the peace.
I think that very constructive conclusion of our meeting is that although experience of those horrible, bloody battlefields, we take lessons that we are going to conciliation or reconciliations. Now time for our audiences. Do we have any questions from the audiences? I just only wanted to remind that the language of our conference, it's rather English. We have
Yes, my name is Piotr Felkier. I'm from National Maritime Museum in Gdańsk, and I have a question about Gallipoli battle, about the naval part. When naval vessels entered the Gallipoli area, they went in a hidden minefield, and many of the ships went down. And among them, there were 3 battleships, 1 French and 2 British. And my question is, what happened to those ships after they went underwater? Are they still underwater, or they were taken back, or what happened to them?
Thank you very much for questions.
Thank you. As far as I know, later on, the Allied forces tried to took some parts of it, but to be honest, I did not specifically research on that what happened to them when they were totally or partly removed. But this is certain that 3 of them were sank, and several of them did not sink, but they were heavily damaged. They at that time returned to their harbors for amendments and for reconstructing it.
And those remains of the vessels that are still underwater, is there possibility to dive near them, or is it forbidden?
So I couldn't hear.
The vessels that are underwater, the remainings of some ships that went down during the battle, because I think still some of them are under the water. Is it possible to go underwater, I mean dive, and see what's inside, what's left?
There are some diving activities alongside the Gallipoli and the Straits, as far as I know.
I think this is one of the subjects connected with what is between memory and tourism business.
Yeah,
so
you're right.
It's also, we have to be sensible.
Okay,
thank you very much for your questions. We are waiting for another. Do we have? No? I can't see, so I think that we can finish this part of our panel, and our conference. I'd like to invite all of you for a break, and we will meet here again on the 3rd part of our forum at 16:30. Thank you very much for your attentions, and thank you for your participation. Dziękuję bardzo. Thank you.